Okay, hope everybody's ready for the next 2 to 3 hours. You guys all got that right when you guys came in? This is a 3-hour roadmap session. Nah, we'll get you out of here on time. Don't worry about it. So, glad to be here. Jonathan Wexler. I head up AI product strategy at SAS. This is probably my 13th or 14th SAS Global Forum, SAS Innovation. So I'm excited to be here to take you through our AI development roadmap. And the reason I kind of joked about 3 hours is I literally could spend 3 hours on our roadmap. There's AI within algorithms, AI across our ecosystem, our platforms, but today's focus really will be on our algorithms. I'll talk louder. I'm good. All right, so really quickly through the agenda. And Brian, I think, set this up really nicely this morning, taking you through. The clicker's not hooked up. Yeah, the clicker's not hooked up. Off to a great start. Yeah, it's changing this, but it's not changing that. There we go. I'm good. All right. So really quickly, the agenda. So as Brian took you through the AI market, agentic AI is exploding. And within the marketplace, there's this notion that humans will be replaced. And as Brian said this morning, there's never been a time that we are more required to be part of a process. So we'll take a quick step through the market and then dive a little bit deeper into composite AI. And this is an area that I believe that SAS really shines and has been leading the marketplace for the last 20, 30 years. We'll talk about SAS Viya. Hopefully most of you are familiar with SAS Viya, but we'll take a really quick trip through the platform and some of the most recent innovations. And then we'll give you a sneak peek at the roadmap for the next 12, 18, 24 months. And then if we have time at the end, feel free to grab me for questions. I'll either take questions here, or you can come find me in the Innovation Hub. And so, just to pause, I'm guaranteeing that many of you are in the AI industry and you try to explain what you do, if you're data scientists, statisticians, and you try to explain to your kids what you do, or to your in-laws, to your parents, and they all give you that kind of side eye and they have no idea what you're talking about. And so, this week, or actually last week, and I want to give this story to you, it's about a minute or two, so just humor me. How to explain what you do to your mother, to your grandmother, what we all do. And for those of you that have kids that play sports, run track, in this case, I was at a track meet, and there's a particular event known as a relay race or a distance medley relay. And for those of you that are familiar with track, in track and relays, there's different styles of runners. So a DMR, distance medley relay, you have folks that are short distance, long distance. There's a mix. So you start off with somebody who's kind of moderate, and then you move into a sprinter, and then you finish with somebody who's a miler or a 1600. But the idea is to optimize the handoffs in your relay. So as I was sitting there at the track meet, I saw the baton being handed from runner to runner. And each runner or agent had different strengths. Some were really good at sprinting, so they were able to run quick models like decision trees. You had folks that are more optimized for longer distances, more complex processes, more strategy. Think of that like a neural network or gradient boosting. But the idea is that you have data or the baton moving through an optimized process. And each agent or each runner needs to adjust. So if the first agent or first runner runs really slowly, the next one may need to run faster, or may need to pivot on the fly to be able to adapt to the race. So again, you may have humans in the loop, and the analogy would be coaches, but then I realized this last night, it's not coaches who are yelling out instructions, it's parents screaming at their kids while they're running to run faster. So there's your human in the loop. So anyways, in terms of explaining AI, I really like this analogy because I think it lends credence to agentic AI, this notion of a balanced, intelligent system. And so that's why where we are today in the market, and I would say then might be the last, let's say, 5 or 10 years. From an experience perspective, low code, no code, drag and drop experiences, where you try to build models, build pipelines, for example, you would do that kind of drag and drop. And there wasn't much interaction. There may have been automation, AutoML running behind the scenes, but in essence, it was kind of a one-way street. And where we are now in the marketplace is we have AI assistants. And so you're beginning to have that conversation with your models, with your analyses. In terms of the actual models that are being run, systems would be model-based. And so you'd run single models, you'd run a gradient boosting, you'd run a decision tree, pick the best model, run a tournament, run a handful, and off you go. And where we are now is this notion of composite AI or a composite agentic AI, where you have multiple methods, multiple structures of data, looking to make decisions on a much grander, larger scale. And then finally, in terms of governance, it used to be that you would just do kind of this reactive model tracking, model health assessments. You'd build the model, you'd track it over time, make changes, rebuild it, et cetera. That would take you 6 months. For many organizations, 6 months to do. And now the expectation is that trust, that governance is embedded into the system. And so as you'll see as we walk through our roadmap, you'll notice that there's inherent guardrails built in throughout the AI ecosystem. And so I think Brian took everybody through this morning, but SAS is set up very well for this agentic AI explosion. And as many of you know who are practicing data scientists, AI is not new. It's undergone different terms. It used to be, it could have been data science, it could have been data mining, statistics. There's a blend of skills. But the point being is we've been doing machine learning, k-nearest neighbors, for example, for the last several decades. And as we moved into the 90s, we started to see a prevalence of compute power. So we started building neural networks, providing neural networks. And then as you're seeing the theme here, we also started growing our unstructured data business, natural language processing, text analytics. And as you'll notice, those components are all the components in composite AI, or what goes into agentic AI today. And then we got into computer vision, which is part of digital twins technology, synthetic data. And then as we moved into the 2020s, this is really where cloud, of course, took off. Our partnerships with Microsoft, with AWS. We have partners where we work with Fabric. We embed ourselves, so we take advantage of copilots. There's a lot of interoperability with the market. And then as we got into the last couple years, that's where generative AI, the notion of reasoning, really injected itself into the algorithmic experience. And then today, where we are today, is agentic AI. Something that we'll talk a little bit about is this notion of quantum AI. And just when you think you've got all the AIs and agentic is fine, quantum takes over. And so we'll go into the quantum realm for you Marvel fans a little bit later. So now this takes us to VIA. Everybody familiar with VIA? Anybody not familiar with VIA? Oh, sucks to be you, I guess. Just one guy in the back. No, just kidding. SAS VIA. So SAS VIA has really undergone an evolution. It really is the intelligence engine, the algorithmic intelligence engine behind much of what we provide. And if you kind of see at the center of the circle, you have SAS VIA, but really around the heart, the concentric circles, you look at composite AI, it's that algorithmic extension to our platform. Think of everything from text analytics, like I mentioned, to optimization, forecasting, statistics, et cetera, et cetera. Think of that as kind of our algorithmic workbench. In terms of the language, we have multiple extensions for the language. So yes, many of you are probably SAS coders, SAS users, but we also provide that extension with Python, with R, with APIs, really your language of choice. And then finally, governance. In terms of providing the guardrails, it is critical. So in every solution you will see me present and most people's present out there in terms of VIA, these three key components are part of almost every SaaS solution. And then as you go outside, you start getting into the co-pilots, that AI-assisted experience, and then finally, agents. And so being able to encapsulate that entire system into one unified view. So that takes us into, let's take a look at composite AI with SaaS VIA. And there's kind of key components, but it's more than just the algorithms. I keep mentioning that it's unstructured data, structured data, text, forecasting, et cetera, et cetera. But there's key components to composite AI. There's the governance aspect of composite. There's the agentifying of the algorithms themselves. There's the ability to package those algorithms. So really, it's kind of this combination of the entire circle. And as you work your way through the circle at the top, think of the algorithms. I mentioned the algorithms, but there's also this notion of quantum intelligence or quantum AI, being able to multi-thread across CPUs, GPUs, and now QPUs in terms of processing power. And as you work your way around the circle, you get into the experience itself. You have co-pilots, you have natural language, you have model context protocols, MCP servers. There's many different ways, many languages to interact with these algorithms. And then finally, you get into the operationalization of the models and the agents themselves, and that's when you get into ML ops, LLM ops, you get into all the IT ops, DevOps, you get into this notion of scaling out your intelligence and kind of scaling out your governance as well. So in terms of composite AI, it's really required to have most of this circle to be able to support that. But of course, and Brian mentioned this morning, there's this balance that if we go too far in terms of autonomy, of providing composite AI, making it black box, and providing it within agents, there still needs to be that inherent trust, those guardrails. So as part of every solution, being able to provide kind of the built-in trust, the built-in tracking into your methods, because there will be humans in the loop, there will be decisions that are made that are critical that need to be explained. And so in terms of the breadth of AI techniques that we have, we also have techniques that were built in to explain the more inherent black box techniques. So let's get into VIA a little bit deeper. And in terms of VIA, there have been many innovations, but really what I want to focus on is the center of this map. And what you're looking at here is a kind of an exploded view of SaaS VIA. In the middle, you have the kind of the traditional ALC, analytic lifecycle, AI lifecycle, where you're building models, deploying models, building visualizations, really having that model development experience. But as you look at kind of the outer rings, there's AI enhancements across our entire kind of industry portfolio. As you get into some of our composability, composable offerings, I mentioned the work with Fabric. We provide many of these capabilities as part of kind of the Azure, as part of the Fabric ecosystem. So these kind of composable extensions of VIA. And then the co-pilots themselves, we'll talk through a little bit greater detail, but being able to interact with our solutions through a natural and language kind of experience. And as you work your way around, you've got model management, you have governance, AI governance, risk. You have a lot of the solutions that are bolt-ons to the rest of the VIA platform. So let's take a look at the middle. So I keep mentioning SaaS VIA Copilot. And so I think we're all familiar with ChatGPT, with a Copilot. The ability to provide human reason into a business problem. And so in this case, and you'll find this is common across our portfolio, the VIA Copilot is very similar across our visualization, our model building, model management. But the idea is that a user writes a prompt, asks a question, looks for a variable, wants to select a model, wants to build a decision. The idea is that a user can write a natural language prompt, and then behind the scenes, the large language model, in our case, a small language model, would interrogate that question and then provide the suggestion, the answer. And ideally, the answer provides, kind of that light bulb where you want to ask another question. So it's not just a one-way street, it becomes more of a conversation. And so what this looks like, what you're looking at now, so this is our Model Studio. It's part of VIA. And this is a solution that allows you to build pipelines, to build models. And so you start with data, and then you have transformations, and then you run a model tournament with many different models, advanced models, and select the best, and then off you go. Now, we do provide out-of-the-box AutoML, so you can just press a button, and it'll look at your data and build out a pipeline for you. That's not natural language. You can just do that out of the box. Or you can drag it yourself. You can start with a blank palette, blank slate, and drag nodes onto the palette. You know what you're doing. You know what feature engineering you want to run, what models you want to select. But what we provide now is this Copilot extension on the right, which allows you to ask questions. So you start with data, and you can ask questions. What do I do? I have no idea what node to add. What's feature engineering? What's imputation? You can start asking these questions, and they're really open-ended, but what the Copilot will do is it'll come back with, say, the top three answers, and you get to select. And so you get to choose your own adventure. And so you can select the transformations. It'll then say, well, what do you want to do next? And you can interact with it and say, well, I really want something that's inherently explainable. So it may give you a decision tree. Maybe it'll give you regression. But if you allow the system to run a little bit longer, it might give you back a neural network or gradient boosting. And so this becomes that experience. But let's say that you don't understand the results. So you ran the tournament. This will also explain the results for you. And so it will explain what those model assessment metrics mean within using the Copilot. And so this is kind of this wonderful kind of SaaS expert or data scientist in a box that's kind of sitting with you, helping you, or sitting next to you to help solve this problem. And so that was drag and drop, that was the pipeline experience. So what if you're just a coder? And I'm sure many of you have any of you used GitHub Copilot? Okay, some of you. In terms of Copilot, so if you know you're a coder, or I want to use code, maybe I'm a novice at SAS, maybe I'm a Python user and I'm just learning SAS. What you're looking at here is Visual Studio. So this is VS Code. This is an extension to SAS, which you can use to code with SAS. And we have this VIA Copilot extension that you can bolt on into the VS Code. And this will, just like before, you can ask questions. I want to build a logistic regression model, and the system will give you that set of suggestions. It'll build out the code line by line for you. It will also explain the code. It'll give you sample codes. So if you know that you want to build a model, and it'll give you the class effects, for example. So it will iteratively step through this process. But it'll also explain the results. So as I mentioned, the experience starts becoming analogous as you're moving through the VIA ecosystem. So that was today. That was today. And as I mentioned, there's a lot more. You certainly go by the booth. I'll be happy to take you through in greater detail all of the VIA kind of enhancements from the past 12 months. But let's take a look ahead. So in terms of value, we're going to break this up, our innovations, our roadmap, into really 4 key areas. And kind of at the bottom of the value chain, when I say bottom, it's just first, composite AI, the algorithms, the ecosystem. It's the math. As you start moving up this innovation curve or this innovation kind of lens, as you start bolting on intelligence, reasoning with the math, that's where the value really starts exploding. And so when you think of Copilot assistance, having that conversation allows you to move along faster, step through a problem more intelligently. It allows you to make quick decisions, fail fast. But as you get into now agentic AI, you've got your math, you've got your copilots, but now you have agentic systems that need to reason with each other, optimize to make decisions, to build out a digital twin, to be able to solve complex problems on multiple dimensions. But in order to do all of this, you need quantum, or you will need quantum, I should say. So I would say over the next, and 2030, that's when it's anticipated, that many folks will be using quantum, and I'll take you through what we're doing with quantum. But as you move up this value chain and you get into quantum intelligence, being able to run all of this is really where you're going to see that exponential growth in value. So let's take a look at the math. Let's take a look at the algorithms. So in terms of machine learning, and I promise you I won't go through every one of these bullets, but the idea is that in terms of machine learning, we have three major areas. Traditional, as we like to call it, traditional machine learning, your math, your neural networks, your gradient boosting, your tree-based models, et cetera, et cetera. There are enhancements there to provide generalized auto-tuning. It's a SAS mechanism, but this generalized hypertune will now allow you to set up your own optimization problems. So on a much larger scale, if you're looking to set up a model tournament or to run different iterations, we will give you the control through this new PROC, this new SAS method or procedure known as hypertune, to be able to, for example, set up the right tournament. We'll be providing foundation models, or we're integrating with foundation models very specific to tabular data. Synthetic data, which is a key component of composite AI, through a recent acquisition, through Hazy in the past probably one and a half years, we have been integrating very quickly the synthetic data algorithms, I should say, into our platform. As you move across into deep learning, computer vision, we'll be upgrading, for example, to YOLO v7. There's this notion of segment anything models, where you can hone in, for example, in computer vision, hone in on an image, create a segment, a box around a particular portion of the image itself, and really start analyzing that at a deeper level. This notion of explainability, of trust, of model agnostic explainability, the ability to explain any model. So have an all-purpose procedure, for example, to explain a neural network. And then finally, as we're getting to streaming, and I would say this is something that lends itself well into the digital twins work, being able to analyze and produce 3D images, not just 2D, 1D, but to be able to do digital signal processing. NLP, natural language processing. So naturally, machine learning, NLP, text analytics, are really interdependent, are really correlated, and I have a point on that in a sec. But in terms of our natural language capabilities, we will be providing kind of the three key components of LLMs. There's the evaluation portion, there's the prompts and the prompt management, prompt creation, prompt generation, and then finally building out the tasks themselves. And so through the experience, these are really the components that go into a lot of the co-pilots that we provide. And this is the portion where customers want to build their own customer RAGs. So to be able to bring in their own intelligence, their own prompting, just like yourself, to bring in prompting into your own personalized experience. And kind of throughout this LLM experience, we'll be providing guardrails, the ability to track toxicity, bias, to be able to evaluate your LLMs, to be able to fine-tune. There's a whole art and there's a whole science that really goes into this. This notion of LLM distillation. So this notion of having a teacher model and a student model to be able to kind of learn, so have a smaller, faster, more efficient model, or a small language model, to be able to learn from a larger language model. It's much faster and much more cost effective, and we'll be providing that through knowledge distillation. So as I keep mentioning, there's this kind of interdependent relationship. And so there's this notion of kind of a hybrid approach. So you have machine learning methods, and you want to use, let's say, machine learning as an input into a text analytics model, for example, to be able to generate or calculate sentiment, estimate sentiment. Or you want to use feature extraction from linguistic rules to be able to generate topics, to generate scores, to use as inputs into machine learning models. This is this notion of unstructured data. And we've been doing this for years. For those of you that have used Enterprise Miner, Text Miner, this was the capability to kind of mix and match flows and really be able to have no bounds in terms of answering questions. And so what we're doing with our Model Studio capabilities is we are smashing them together. And so being able to have one pipeline to rule them all, to be able to have a pipeline, for example, as I mentioned, that would have text capabilities in your feature extraction, feature generation, and then bolt on machine learning models. But don't stop there. Let's say you want to add in a Python package externally. You can also bring in a Python package. You can you can work with code, you can work with R. Really, this really expands and explodes the capability of what we have in SaaSfy. And then once you're done with this process, then you bring it into our model management, into our governance capabilities, build containers or wrap containers around these models, and that's the foundation to an agent. And so this really gives you that capability between the work here and then that intelligent decisioning demo that we had this morning to be able to wrap models and to generate agents. Statistics. So statistics and econometrics. For those of you that are heavily into regulated industries, working in pharmaceuticals, health and life sciences, working in fraud, really this is the foundation to much of what we do. And I would say the focus for us in statistics and econometrics is to blur that line. And how many of you have heard of causal AI? You will. This is this notion of determining, is there a cause and an effect, a causal relationship between a marketing treatment, a drug, pharmaceutical, a treatment in a clinical trial, and an outcome. And so this notion of causal AI, it's again, another AI where lines are blurred. Just like machine learning and text, this is statistics and econometrics. And so this idea to track patients over time, to generate segments, there's a lot here that really the knowledge and the breadth and depth of SaaS, this is an area that we are also heavily investing in. And this is also an area where you're going to see synthetic data. So synthetic data generation is really important here because when you're in clinical trials, it can be hard to get real-life data. You want to simulate that experience before it happens. And so, again, this area is an area that really excited about, and I would encourage you to come by the statistics booth to learn about this, and maybe we can give you a demo. And then finally, in terms of algorithms, optimization. So I like to call these kind of the embedded technologies that really sit across almost every algorithm in SaaS. Whether these are optimization solvers, network analytics, being able to investigate relationships between, it could be bad actors, it could be influencers, but generating kind of network relationships, visual network relationships, and to be able to forecast that kind of experience. And this is an area where we are, again, heavily invested in terms of the network analysis. So as I mentioned, the ability to analyze pharmaceutical data or to be able to analyze DNA structures, molecular style data, this is where quantum computing, which we'll talk about in a sec, really shines. And then in terms of our forecasting abilities, we'll be providing MCPs or extensions into our forecasting capabilities to be able to use, for example, natural language to be able to generate forecasts. So in terms of the co-pilots, I showed you what we had out the door, what we had today. Here's another one that actually is out today, but where we are also investing. So you're looking at this visualization experience, and many times, you start with this blank palette. Again, you don't want to code, you just want to interact with your system to be able to look at features, in this case, geographically, but you're not really sure what to do. So we provide that Copilot experience, again, on the right, but let's say you want to expand that experience and build models. And so what we'll allow you to do is the Copilot, you'll ask a question, what should I do? Should I generate a correlation matrix, a heat map, or should I build a model, a decision tree? It will generate that visualization or that model for you and allow you to just drag it onto your palette. So this is in addition to the pipeline experience, the coding experience, and now we're providing kind of this interactive, kind of inferential experience where you can just real kind of experiment and learn, test and learn very quickly. But as I mentioned, it's a two-way street. So if you get a visualization or a model and you want to understand what factors, what's an odds ratio, what are the odds of an event happening, you can interact with this just as well. And it'll provide that explanatory experience. And maybe you're in this experience and you want to extend it now, or you want to drop the code. And so you can ask the system, hey, should I move into code or should I move into a pipeline? And it'll very quickly open up that model studio, that pipeline experience to be able to extend all the work that you've done. And so this Copilot experience really allows you, it's the glue between the different personas. So maybe you have a persona on your team that's a coder, somebody else who's a drag and dropper, somebody else who's a data scientist. It allows those folks to collaborate. And then finally, in terms of code assistants. And so the code assistants that are out there today, I mentioned the Copilot work that we're doing with Visual Studio. The focus there was generating code. The primary focus, I should say, was generating code, generating an understanding, being able to explain maybe what you see on the screen. Where we're taking that in the next few months is to agentify that and really focus on the outcome, the value, the results themselves, to be able to solve business problems in addition to just solving a coding challenge. Because those Copilots before were just solving code. It was writing SAS code for you. What we want to do is to be able to solve the problem for you. And so you want to package up the model as an agent or in a container. You're able to kind of ask those questions with more of a business need in mind. So as I mentioned, I keep talking about agents. There's many different ways you can interact with agents at SAS, with agents with other companies. There's this notion of having kind of either an MCP or Model Context Protocol, having this kind of thin layer, which then interacts with other agents behind the scenes. And so the example that I give you here would be an example of a time series agent that we're working through. And the idea is we'd give you kind of one entryway into it. And depending on the question that you ask behind the scenes, it may ask a different question of another agent. But again, we'll handle that for you. So in this case, if you need to generate synthetic data or you have missing data, which is terrible for time series, we'll use our data maker behind the scenes or our synthetic data generator. We'll replace missing values, we'll look for anomalies, et cetera, et cetera. Really, this agent is a framework that we provide you, and the only thing you need to worry about is that MCP server. And across the life cycle. So it's not just building models, analyzing data, but it may be that you want to build your own applications. And so you have your own applications in Claude, for example, or external applications that you're looking to build. Again, that MCP server, which is the blue kind of oval in the middle, that MCP server is where you would interact with SASFIA. And again, that's where we are heavily investing, is allowing you to bring in or interact with applications that maybe you've built or external systems, et cetera. So agentic AI is bringing together an entire system, but it's also connecting. It's that baton, it's the intelligence layer between systems. And some of the examples that we have, some of the agents that we are building, I mentioned the time series agent, but we are heavily focused on building models or providing models, out-of-the-box models, but also out-of-the-box agents that solve larger problems. And so what is available today is the ability to have very specific purpose-built models, depending on your data structure, your data model, to be able to solve problems, let's say, in fraud, in risk, in banking, in health and life sciences. It could be certainly in marketing, property valuation, in the public sector. So the ability to really interact with SAS in a way that you give us the data and we'll give you the business outcome or give you the probability. Or in the case of healthcare, we have a data mapper agent where its sole purpose in life is to be able to look at either unseen data, make recommendations for data that you should bring in and join, and to be able to generate that, for example, analytical-based table. And so these agents will cover kind of a wide variety of business problems. So let's get into quantum. Quantum. So just when you think you know everything about CPUs, working on your laptops, on your computers, maybe multi-threading within CPUs, and then GPUs come along and you're working in memory, and that's fine. And then here we go, QPUs. And so the business problems that are out there are not single-threaded. You know this. Being able to run simulation, optimization problems on a scale where you need to make billions of computations really requires compute power that really hasn't existed And it won't really exist in massively parallel form for another 3 to 5 years. But what SAS is doing is we are pointing our algorithms, we are set up well to be able to allow our algorithms to work with quantum compute. And so a typical quantum problem, and there's probably not a typical quantum problem, but the scale of a quantum problem, you may start with something that's 1,000 records or 1,000 variables, and it very quickly exponentially grows into what are known as circuit designs, trying to build out or solve the problem and to be able to frame the problem. And then you run it through iterations or jobs, and then you run it 1,000 more times in shots. And this very quickly can scale to the billions of computations that need to be run. And so through, for example, quantum with SAS, we are providing this notion of a quantum lab. And so if you are a coder, if you're somebody that prefers to drag and drop, that's fine. We provide kind of this quantum AI toolbox, this quantum AI kind of chatbot on the right, this Copilot, that will help you set up, in the quantum field, set up your circuits, to be able to set up that experiment, to be able to generate that code for you automatically. Really what this quantum AI tutor will allow you to do is to simulate the experience. And so what we're providing probably in the next 9 months, this notion of a quantum AI, it's a simulator. In essence, these are simulators that will run right within VIA. And you remember, as I mentioned, really the massively parallel quantum compute may not be available for another 3-4 years in the industry. But you can take advantage of it now. It will be cost effective. It will be performant. We are prototyping with VIA to be able to simulate that quantum experience. And as I mentioned, even if you haven't been using quantum now, I promise that you will in the future, just like you're doing with CPUs, GPUs, and eventually QPUs. So in summary, our roadmap really covers 4 key tenets. Composite AI, there's a lot that goes in, as I mentioned, that goes into composite AI. It's investing in our algorithms. It's investing in machine learning, very specifically computer vision, deep learning, statistics, econometrics, optimization, quality control, QC. There's a lot there baked into composite. And really being able to provide that multidisciplinary experience from coders to folks that want to build pipelines, to folks that want to build applications, that's really the foundation to blending together business value. Copilots. You will find a Copilot everywhere across the VIA suite within the next couple years. You'll see it everywhere. That experience will be pervasive across the suite, and it should allow you to solve problems not just in the interface that you're in, but it will get you to your next step in the process. And so if you think of it as a Copilot in the life cycle to step you through from data all the way through to decision. Agentic AI, I think we've said a lot about that. That is the present, that is the future right now, where the Copilots and the composite work really goes into that work, our work with Agentic. And we will provide, if you want to use our tools to be able to build models that can then be wrapped in decisions, which then can become part of an Agentic workflow, you'll be able to do that with VIA. If you want to use an external tool and to be able to communicate with SAS VIA, for example, for the models and for the math, you'll be able to do that. And then finally, within quantum compute or quantum computing, working with the SAS tooling that is really geared towards solving problems on an unparalleled scale. There's capabilities that we provide through caching, through auto-tuning, parallelism over the years. And it's really started with our multi-vendor architecture, and it worked its way through our high-performance work, our multi-threading, to be able to really take you through a business problem to be able to hopefully be future-proof. And with that is all that I prepared. I'd be happy to spend time on questions, or if you want to come grab me on the side, that's fine. But I want to keep you on time for your next sessions. So thank you.